So state regulators are deciding who pays for billions of dollars in new power lines needed to support Northern Virginia's booming data center industry.
And should Dominion customers continue sharing those costs, or should the data centers driving the demand pay more of that bill? Chief investigative reporter Eric Fleck explains what's at stake.
Data centers aren't just driving much of Northern Virginia's economy, they're also driving massive growth in Virginia's electric grid.
That grid took us 100+ years to build out. We're talking about tripling the size of it, quadrupling the size of it over the next 20 to 30 years to try to meet this demand. It's unprecedented.
Dominion used to spend about $700 to $800 million a year on transmission projects. Now, that spending is projected to climb to about $3 billion a year.
This is astronomical ask from the industry.
Julie Bolthouse is the director of land use for the Piedmont Environmental Council.
Who should pay for it?
It has to be the data center industry.
But right now, customers help pick up the tab. Here's how. Every Dominion bill includes what's known as a transmission rider, called Rider T1, that recovers the costs of building and upgrading electric transmission lines and grid infrastructure. Dominion says a typical residential customer currently pays about $11.79 a month through Rider T1. That amount is expected to increase as more transmission projects are built across Virginia. Look at this. The Piedmont Environmental Council mapped transmission projects statewide, and all those red dots represent a rapidly expanding network of transmission infrastructure stretching across the Commonwealth.
Starting Tuesday, state regulators will consider potential changes to the way energy companies like Dominion pay for transmission lines that fuel data centers. And it all comes down to the but-for debate. Meaning, if a transmission line would have never been built but for the data center that it ends up powering, should the data center pay the entire cost of that transmission line? Or should the cost be shared by the data centers as well as ratepayers like you and me?
Governor Spanberger's administration is now among those urging regulators to shift those costs onto the data centers themselves. But the data center industry is pushing back. In a statement, the Data Center Coalition told WUSA 9 Virginia's own analysis found large users, including data centers, are paying a larger portion of transmission costs every year, while residential customers' share of transmission costs have fallen. And Dominion Energy told us it put in place protections to prevent data center costs from being passed on to residential customers. It said data centers will soon be in a separate rate class and will pay significantly higher upfront costs and demand charges. But Bolthouse believes the biggest transmission costs are still being passed on to everyday customers.
So you would argue that whatever cost increases have been put on the data center industry in the last year are a drop in the bucket.
Yes.
Compared to what they need to pay.
Yes, exactly.
So tonight, the question isn't whether the power lines are coming, it's who pays for them.
They are coming and they are already here. Amazon is the biggest data center developer in Northern Virginia. So we asked them, hey, you got any problem paying for these? They pointed to the White House Ratepayer Protection Pledge. It signed in March. It's a voluntary pledge, not a law, in which data center companies promise to pay for their grid upgrades for facilities that require more electricity. They say, hey, we've pledged to do our part.
But is that good enough?
It's not good enough for consumer advocates and people like the Piedmont Environmental Council. They're not buying it. They tell me pledges like that one don't do anything until they're actually written in stone. And that's what's being argued in Richmond right now. State regulators have a couple more weeks to decide whether or not they are going to mandate this. Billions of dollars on the line, money in people's bills every month on the line.
Clearly spelled out.
Clearly spelled out. And the number could be going up unless state regulators step in right here. Okay. So we'll see.
Watch and see what they do.
Yep.
All right, Fleck. Thank you.
Okay.